We call this class best practices because, well, I think for the people who are in public companies, they probably know the basics, but what they'd really like to know are, well, what's the best way to do it? And since we've been around quite a bit, I think we've seen just about everything. And I can tell you what works and what doesn't work, and I'll tell you why. And those of you who are old enough know that scandals were nothing new. There was scandals back in the late 70s, and the accounting firms, 12 accounting firms got together. They formed this committee of the sponsoring organizations of the Treadway Commission, and they all sat down and they wrote a standard of internal control. So the standard of internal control is a way to think about things. How do we structure our thinking? What words do we use to describe certain concepts and ideas that we have? They put a framework together, which is this cube. There's a lot of things that could go wrong in a company, and you just can't include them all in SOX. But COSO, once you consider for COSO purposes, operations, financial reporting, and compliance with laws. But for Sarbanes-Oxley, the only thing that we focus on is financial reporting. This is the same thing I was showing you in the previous cube. Here, going across the top, but I'm showing you this way with intersecting circles. So, okay, we've got financial reporting, and sometimes financial reporting does affect operations. So sometimes we have, well, let's just say inventory. Inventory is operations, but it's financial reporting. That's in this brown area here. That would be in scope for a Sarbanes-Oxley project. But we might have other things in operations, say, well, we're going to tell our engineers what the specs need to be on the next product they're developing. Well, we could make a mistake and build a product that nobody wants to buy. And yeah, we have to write off a whole bunch of stuff, and all our R&D has to be written off. It's an operational decision. We could have some risk there, but that risk in this yellow area is outside the scope of Sarbanes-Oxley. So there's this pulling and tugging, and different auditors, different people inside your company, people on the board, are going to want to get a consensus about what are we going to include in the scope and what are we not. And if your goal is to make sure you get the financial reporting right, I would argue the last thing you want to do is distract yourself with too much to do that is really in the gray fringes. Okay, so now we'll go to the next stage of this, scope, schedule, and resources. So this is how we determine what is included in our project. This is the first thing we do. When we start a new SOX project, project planning, we plan the project. This is the most important, I think, area. If you're not knowledgeable about SOX, I would strongly encourage you to find somebody who's done this before. I'm not saying hire cost advisors. What I'm saying is find another company that's similar to yours, non-competing, and or if you're in a non-competitive industry, maybe like healthcare, not so competitive, get a roundtable started. Find some other controllers and CFOs that are doing what you're doing, and meet once a month. That's so valuable because that will tell you, well, what are you doing, what kind of formats are you using, who's doing your work, what time frame, how deep do you go. This whole planning can save a tremendous amount over here. Scope, schedule, and resources. The next thing that happens is, once you've decided what's in scope, and by the way, these correspond to this color here in the pyramid, or documentation and testing. That's all this. We're going to start documenting. So we start with the entity level, I mentioned that. Then we're into payroll, and we're looking at fixed assets, we're looking at order entry, we're looking at treasury functions, we're looking at how we close the books. We're documenting all that. We're going to develop flow charts, and we're also going to develop lists of risks and controls within each of those areas. When you start testing, then you find, well, we're supposed to be reconciling the bank account, and we asked, give me March, give me August, and give me November bank recs. Well, okay, I can give you March, but we really are not caught up. We haven't done the others. And okay, so there you know what the control ought to be, but it's not being done. And you did publish a 10Q during your Q3 and, you know, and maybe Q4 without those accounts being reconciled. So there's probably a different kind of deficiency. This is called an operating deficiency. So here we're design deficiency, think documentation design. And testing, something fails a test, we have a test exception. That's called a operating deficiency. The control's not working. This is probably, there should be a big giant star on here. This is probably, well, one of the top 3 slides I'm going to show you today. What should be your guiding principles? As few key controls as possible. Controls are a good thing, right? Well, I'm not saying don't have controls. What I'm saying, though, is find the controls that are the most important ones, put them in your documentation and count them. It doesn't mean you stop doing the other stuff. You know, you don't tell them, don't do that anymore, it's not in SOX. But the ones that you're going to make officially as part of your project, you want to have as few of those as possible. The reason is, you know, as we just heard, it bogs you down, but you have to test every control forever, every year, forever. So if you've got 1,000 controls versus 300, you're testing 3 times as much as you need to. Learn from others. Everybody sitting in this room, you have an opportunity to learn from people that have done this. There's so many companies that are accelerated filers, a lot of friends in your network. You can contact them, say, hey, you know, I'll take you out to lunch. Let's talk about SOX. We're going to do SOX. Can you give me some? Utilize experts. As I mentioned, particularly in the planning phase, if you can get somebody to help get the project organized and scoped right and the timing figured out, that's probably the best use of experts. Leverage internal knowledge resources. So the people in your company, they know how these processes work. They know what the controls ought to be. A lot of times it's enough to say to them, well, this is what we're worried about. This is what the risk is. What prevents that from happening? And they can tell you, well, we do this. This would prevent that from happening. It's a lot better to go and interview people internally than it is to try and think yourself at maybe your level, your controllers and CFOs, consultants, external auditors, internal auditors, than for you to try to think of what they should be doing or might be doing. Just ask them and you'll get a better result. And then design the project for reuse. So if you're having to comply with SOX, or even if you're not, it doesn't go away. You don't do a project once and then stop. The documentation you're creating, the test plans you're creating are going to be used year after year. And in fact, if you're a company with multiple locations, you'll probably start at headquarters. Let's start it here and then we'll roll it out. Well, if you did documentation, flowcharts, whatever, wrong at headquarters, and then you multiply it, you clone it for 5 different other locations and send that out there, then you've got 6 problems instead of just the 1. So it's really important to design this stuff efficiently up front so that it can be reused.